In Activity 5, Moonlight and Moon Shadows, students will first observe that, like sunlight, moonlight is bright enough to cast a shadow and that the shadow moves as the moon changes position in the sky. They will then discuss the source of sunlight and shadows, predict whether or not the moon can cast a shadow, and observe and record the movement of shadows cast by the sun and the moon. You will need the following materials from the kit: Activity Sheet 5, reclosable plastic bags, dowels, cans of modeling clay, and parent letter B. You will also need to provide Activity Sheet 3, Part A, sheets of large white paper, boxes of crayons, pencil or marker, timer or clock. For the best results, begin this activity around the time of the full moon. The full moon phase reflects the most sunlight and is apt to provide students with strong shadows. Conduct Session 1 on a sunny day, as students will be observing the shadows cast by sunlight. Locate a large picture window that receives plenty of direct sunlight, or plan to conduct the activity outside. Make a copy of Activity Sheet 5 for each student. Each team of 2 will need a box of crayons. You will need a dowel, a small chunk of modeling clay, a large sheet of white paper, a pencil or marker, and a timer or clock. To begin the activity, ask students, what is sunlight? Where does sunlight come from? Tell them that sunlight is light energy that comes from the sun. Go on to explain that the sun is a fiery ball of burning gas. The burning is what makes the sun glow and give off light. Next, ask students, what is a shadow? What do you need to make a shadow? A shadow is a dark, shady area created when an object blocks the light. Explain that in order to make a shadow, you need to have a bright light and an object to place in the path of the light. When the object is placed in the path of a bright light, it will cast a shadow on the other side of the light. Have student volunteers point out some shadows in the classroom or outdoors. Then distribute Activity Sheet 5 to each student and a box of crayons to each team of 2. Give students time to complete the sheet. Next, tell students that you are going to set up a shadow stick so they can see what happens to a sun shadow during the day. Place a piece of clay on the floor in front of a window that receives direct sunlight. Stand a dowel upright in the clay. Point out the shadow cast by the dowel when it is in bright sunlight. Place a large sheet of white paper underneath the clay so that the shadow of the dowel falls on the paper. Anchor the paper at each corner with heavy objects. Next, use a pencil or marker to draw a line on the paper along the length of the shadow. Explain to students that they are going to check this shadow repeatedly during the day to see how it changes. Have pairs of students return to the shadow stick 30 minutes later. Supervise them as they draw a new line along the length of the shadow. Write the time next to each line. Repeat this procedure several more times. To prepare for Session 2, make a copy of Parent Letter B for each student. Students will conduct part of this session at home after dark, while accompanied by an adult or older sibling. Send home Parent Letter B, which explains what the student is to do and how the parent can help. Divide each can of modeling clay into 4 equal parts and place each part in a separate reclosable plastic bag. Each student will need a chunk of modeling clay in a reclosable plastic bag, a dowel, and a sheet of large white paper. Conduct Session 2 after several shadow readings have been taken. Remove the paper and display it for all students to see. Help them to see that each of the lines stands for the shadow cast by the shadow stick in sunlight at a certain time of day. Ask students, what happened to the shadow over the course of the day? Depending on when and where the shadow stick was set up, students should note that the shadow got shorter or longer over the course of the day and that it moved across the paper from right to left. Then ask, why did the shadow change in size and direction? Remind students that in Activity 3, they discovered that the turning of Earth causes both the sun and the moon to appear to move across the sky. The movement of the sun across the sky causes the shadow to change. Next, ask students, what is moonlight? Students may assume that, like the sun, the moon gives off its own light. Accept all answers at this point. Ask, have you ever seen a shadow made by moonlight? Many students will believe that shadows are only made by sunlight. Distribute the materials to each student. Tell them to bring these items home and, with the help of a parent or older sibling, set up their shadow sticks outdoors, away from any lights, and record any shadow cast by the moon. They should take one reading every half hour for at least 1 hour. Remind students to bring their materials back to school with them tomorrow. To prepare for Session 3, each student will need his or her moon shadow paper from the previous night and his or her copy of Activity Sheet 3, Part A. Each team of 2 will need a box of crayons. Collect and display the moon shadow drawings made by the students and lead a discussion about the results. Ask students, did the stick cast a shadow in the moonlight? Students should report that it did. Explain to the students that any bright light source can cause a shadow to be cast. Then, give each pair of students a box of crayons. Have students draw a line connecting the tip of each shadow on their moon shadow sheets. Then, have them retrieve Activity Sheet 3, Part A, which shows the path of the moon in the sky. Lead students to see that the path of connected shadows on both papers are curved lines. Ask the students, what do the moon shadow drawings tell us about the moon? How is the moon like the sun? Students should know that the moon, like the sun, can be bright enough to cast shadows. Students should also see that shadows made by the moon move like shadows made by the sun, and they should come to understand that moon shadows move like sun shadows because the moon changes position in the sky just like the sun does due to the turning of Earth. Finally, remind students that they have seen that moonlight can be bright enough to cast shadows. Ask, but what causes the moon to give off light? Explain that the moon is not a ball of fire like the sun, but rather a giant rock covered with sand and dust. It produces no light of its own. Then ask, so where does the light come from? Accept all answers. Tell students that they will learn the answer to this question in Activity 10. To conclude the activity, collect and wipe the dowels and return them, along with the clay, to the kit. For science background, reinforcement activities, curriculum connections, and information about the Delta Science Reader, please consult your DSM Teacher's Guide.